So I guess the only other argument that would pop up to me in my head would be somebody saying, what about humane alternatives? Because this semester that just passed in my marine biology class, we were learning about a completely soy-based salmon alternative that apparently looks and tastes and smells just like identical to raw salmon. So when it comes to humane, people often say cage-free and free range, and there's lots of problems with those. Do you want to tell them about the problems with those?
Yeah. So the thing with quote unquote humane farming, such as those cases, is often meat and animal products that are advertised as humane are often still pretty egregious. And a lot of the times, they do still get sent to the same slaughterhouses that animals that are raised inhumanely get sent to anyways.
Right.
So an example of humane upbringing being egregious is with cage-free hens. Uh, Often, this doesn't mean that they can frolic in the meadows, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, they're put in crowded sheds, and they can still live their whole lives without seeing sunlight. And it's still the case that, like, a thing with chickens, hens, is if they're in a crowded area and they're stressed out, then they'll start pecking each other. And this could lead to them, like eating each other.
Right.
Or, like, they wound each other and those wounds get infected. Or, like, straight up, some of them die, you know? They, yeah. And in response to this, instead of giving these animals enough space, they cut their beaks off.
Right.
And they do this with, like, a hot blade. And yeah, and this has been shown to cause them pain, like, far into their lives, far after, like, the process is done.
Right. So clearly they're advertising to ease your conscience, but in reality there is still a lot of issues with how they do this.
I want to bring up two more points to the humane farming thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, like, the animals are completely humanely, as we've decided, they're completely humanely produced, right? Or raised,
Right.
or farmed. If the only reason that we're raising them is to slaughter them for meat, can we possibly say, without, like, contradicting the definition, is it possible to say that we're humanely slaughtering a sentient being that prefers to live? Is it possible to slaughter a being like that humanely? What do you think?
I feel like the answer is no, because we talked about this earlier. If the pig or the cow or the chicken is born and all they want to do is run around in the yard and eat grain, they're just as entitled to that as I am to try and grow up and be a teacher. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think it's been clear on the points that you've shown me, at least, that all of the value that we gain from the food that we eat, none of it is worth the pain and suffering that these animals are going through. But that's just what I'm seeming to get from this.
Yeah. I think it raises the issue of, like, if a murderer, a serial killer, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
like, only murder their victims quickly and painlessly in their sleep, so they never know what happened.
Right.
No pain. Could you call that humane slaughter? Or, like, a humane way? Humane serial killing, you know? It feels very wrong to call it humane?
I don't think you can, because at least for me, if we're working off sentience, just because you're unconscious doesn't mean you're not sentient, right? So it may be unconscious, but it's not humane. And I think the root of the question you're asking me is there a humane way to kill animals? And that's where I think we can transition into hunting, because I would say, of all the alternatives to still consuming meat, being able to fell a 250-pound animal to fill your freezer and feed your family for a year is economically viable. But Singer says that animals that are hunted are often wounded and they suffer for minutes, hours, days after they've been hit. And only 11% of deer died before being shot 2 to 3 times. And crossbows wounded 50% of the animals that they were struck with. So while I can't disagree with these numbers, what I'm trying to get at is that in hunting, you have to pay for a hunting license. You usually have to pay people whose land it is to hunt on their land. You usually have to pay to get to where you're going, etc., etc. And a large portion of these fees that you're paying is going into the conservation of the animals. A lot of species only have certain tags that you can shoot, males versus females, certain sizes that you can collect when it comes to grabbing crabs, grabbing fish, etc., etc., to try and help balance their gender ratio, etc., etc., so you don't disrupt their natural biodiversity. So while I see there is issues in hunting, in my eyes, if we are to ethically consume meat again, at all, that would be the only way. Because, I don't know, you could speak to this more than I do. I wouldn't say that any of the ways that we buy meat is ethical.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree. But on the topic of hunting specifically, I think I used to have sympathy for hunting as like the one ethical way, but I feel like after further thought, I think somebody who is completely honest with themselves needs to ask themselves, why do I want to hunt, or why am I hunting? If you are doing so because you need to survive, like in the case of like indigenous cultures, right?
Yeah.
Then, I mean, I'm cool with that. There's exceptions to moral rules. Like, I think it's fine, or I think it's morally justifiable to like kill a human if you have to for self-defense, right?
Right.
So there's almost always exceptions, and yeah, and veganism is no different. But that being said, if you're doing so and you don't need to do so in order to survive, then why are you doing it?
Right.
In most cases, you're doing it like for the thrill of the hunt, right?
Right.
You're doing it for sport. I mean, that's why it's called a sport, you know? And if you're doing it for sport, is the thrill of the hunt so important that it overrides the consideration that of well-being that we should give animals, the well-being of animals? And that would be like, is the fun that you get from hunting more important than the suffering that animals go through when like they're not shot well, when they're not killed painlessly and they have to like wander around wounded. Or in the case of fishing, does it override like fish getting impaled through their jaws with hooks and then like being released because it was just for fun, and then their whole life is like messed up after that. Yeah. And even in the case of like you mentioned Steven Ranella before. I've never heard of him before, but you introduced him as a guy who's like always gets the kill shot.
Well,
right?
that's not what I was trying to say. The statement that I made that I didn't make today is that Steven Ranella has a TV show on Netflix called Meat Eater, and he and his friends try to do the best that they can when it comes to taking only kill shots, to the point where there are not a majority of episodes, but large amounts of the episodes where he doesn't actually end up taking anything because he knew he couldn't get a clean kill. So I'm saying you need to exercise patience, you need to exercise temperance, and everything that you need to exercise in all walks of life, the same way you do when you're hunting, and that he's capable of it. But this is just my bid that if we are to eat meat, continue to eat meat, that hunting is the way to do it. But go ahead and continue what you were going to say.
Yeah. Okay. So if we imagine somebody like him, or like your description of him, I know nothing about him, who always gets the kill shot, and if he can't, then he abstains, right? Nobody's that good when they just start, It always takes practice, and it takes mistakes to learn, right? So is animal suffering worth it, I guess, just to like, I don't know, learn how to kill animals right, without them suffering? Is the fun of it worth putting non-human animals through that?
So, from the information I gathered from Singer, you gathered from Singer, and who is the other philosopher?
Jeremy Bentham.
I'm hoping that we have put forth the case that Sunny was trying to put forth, that regardless, as you could see, I was putting in my efforts to say if, ands, or buts. When you come to this question of the principle of equal consideration, and if you don't accept that, then the principle of minimal consideration, and you're applying it logically and consistently, there is no way to escape the fact that we could at least not find any justification for the trivial benefits of killing an animal because there are alternative methods like a vegan lifestyle.
Yeah, so one last argument. In the case of like humane alternatives and hunting, if I say like, okay, fine, those ways are ethical, right? And I concede that point. That would still demand a lot of change from people. Like, pretty much every piece of meat accessible to people, whether it's through fast food restaurants like McDonald's or their grocery stores, all those pieces of meat most definitely came from factory farmed animals, right? You would have to really go out of your way. You wouldn't be able to eat meat or animal products from those sources anymore. You would have to go out of your way to find like a farm that you're 100% sure like does everything right and does not send them to the same slaughterhouses as the factory farmed animals go to. Or you would have to exclusively eat hunted meat, right?
Right.
And I think those are, I don't think that's what people think of when they're when they ask, is humanely raised animals okay to eat, or is hunted animals okay to eat? I think like if somebody says yes, then they would extend that to all meat, usually. And I guess I just want to say that no. If it's already established that factory farmed animals are a no-go, then you still have to make a lot of change.
Okay, so no, I'm just making sure I've got your point. What you're saying is that veganism is going to demand a lot out of you, and by accepting, or maybe not accepting, but at least if you were to accept the principles that we're putting forth, you're saying there's a lot more than people realize they would have to give up to live by these principles.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we merely accept like the principle of minimal consideration, if we merely accept that like animal cruelty just for the sake of trivial benefits is wrong, then that demands a lot of change,
So, with that in mind, I'm going to open the floor up to you, Sunny, to give the people who are listening to this some recommendations when it comes to knowledge, when it comes to platforms where they can learn more, when it comes to recipes, food that you like to eat, etc., because we're all about the practicality here. And if we're going to show them that this is potentially a moral and ethical philosophy that is to be followed, I feel like it's very important to provide them ways to at least start doing that.
In terms of recommendations, I'll just jump right into the recommendations. I'd like to preface this by saying I don't think I'm healthy.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I don't consider myself a healthy person, but it's not because I'm vegan. It's because I like junk food,
Okay.
But as you've already mentioned, nutritionists agree that a vegan diet can be healthy.
Right.
A healthy, balanced vegan diet would include a variety of vegetables, legumes, nuts, etc. I would recommend anybody interested do their own research.
Of course.
So I don't muck anything up. And if you want to check out a documentary, especially if you feel that people cannot be strong or lose strength under veganism, you should check out the documentary Game Changers. It's on Netflix, and it's pretty much all about ripped vegans and super fit vegans, breaking records or performing on the world stage. And I think that's all I have to say.
Well, Sunny, I just want to start off by saying thank you for taking the time. This is not the first time we have recorded this episode. We recorded this once already. There were some technical difficulties. We cried about it, and now we're back again. But I appreciate you taking the time to come and educate me, educate whoever decides to listen to this. We should not be your only resource. Like Sunny said, if you seriously consider this lifestyle, do your own research. Speak to a nutritionist. Speak to people who actually have degrees in these types of things. But I want to be able to provide at least an opener to these type of things and show people that veganism does not have to be militant. Veganism does not have to be painful. It does not need to make your life suck. But it's actually a livable, workable option that produces sensible human beings like yourself. So thank you, Sunny, for taking the time and coming to speak with us on the Fork in the Road today.
Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. You don't have to thank me, man. You're doing us a favor. You're educating us, bro.
No, thank you. You deserve the thanks.
Well, okay. I appreciate it. I will not fight you anymore. You said already that you didn't think you have anything else to say, but I'm providing you one more opportunity. Is there anything else you want to say to the people before I cut this guy off?
No.
All right. Well, he is a man of many less words than I am, and that makes the world a beautiful place, because if everybody talked as much as I did, we would never get through this. So thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you learned something about the ethics of animal care, about equality, about the principle of equal or minimal consideration, and hopefully you can take this and apply this to your life somehow. And we'll catch you when we catch you. We'll see you when we see you. Thanks for listening.